Hello, and welcome to a new episode of Science Speedrun, a channel on which you and I try to reproduce the statistical results of a paper in the domain of psychology and psychiatry. And I have to start off this episode with a content warning because in this episode we're trying to reproduce a study that trials an intervention to prevent people from committing suicide or trying to commit suicide after having made an attempt. And so I just want you to be aware some of the content relates to suicide and suicide prevention. So without further ado, let's get started. Let's try to reproduce this scientific study. Hi, and welcome to this science speedrun in which I am reproducing a randomized controlled trial that is an intervention with a specific new therapy called ASSIP on people who have tried to commit suicide in order to prevent them from trying to commit suicide again. It's a clinical trial, it's registered, and let's go to the article, let's review what they did, and let's see whether we can download the data and actually reproduce the results, making sure the findings are as the authors present them. So I'm just gonna pin you guys on top of the screen so that you're gonna stay with me. You're gonna be able to see me even if I switch from application to application. Here we are. It's an article published in PLOS Medicine. It's by Gysin Maillart et al. I'm sorry, I'm probably butchering that name. It's not my native language. And the article targets people that have attempted suicide and basically tries to prevent that from happening again, with a new therapy that involves 3 sessions in which they build a rapport with the patient, and after those 3 sessions the patients have strategies to prevent suicide attempts from reoccurring. And there's also a personal touch in that they receive a postcard or letter from the therapist every 3 months in the first year and then every 6 months in the second year. Okay. Now we're in luck because if you scroll down quite a small bit, you find that there is a way to access the data. I'll click the link later, and it would lead us to a website where we have the data. Okay. Now, what's important to note is that clinical trials nowadays have to be registered with clinical trial registers where they outline their primary outcomes and their study design and their intended sample size and all that stuff, so that there's no way to fudge that after the fact when people started collecting data for this trial. That wasn't an obligation yet, so they did register the trial, but they did so after already enrolling people. Now, that could be viewed as a way to sort of still fudge data, but what I found very interesting is that the authors have, among the supplementary information, a study protocol dated 2008, so before data collection started, which is presented to the ethical committee before the study could start, and you can review it and you'll find that the outcomes are not described as well as clinicaltrials.gov would demand it, but well enough where we could be pretty certain that the outcome they intended to use before starting a trial is actually the outcome they used. But feel free to go there, check out for yourself. And it's very open, obviously, of them. Now we can check that sort of the protocol they handed to the ethics committee was actually similar to the protocol they used in the final study and the statistical analysis that fitted. So let's go back up. Right, as I said, there's a link to the data. It will open this file. You can download the data. A few of those downloads are me downloading it before, during takes of this video that failed. There were quite a few. Anyway, I already got the data set up in R, and let's go there and let's see if we can reproduce the results. So in R, you will find among the files an R data object. So the authors used R, that's great for us, and a script and a README. So for now, let's open the script. The script is theirs. I added code here and there, which I label code I added, right, and we'll get there. So basically, the data set is as follows. And let's read it into R first. No, not for now, please. So there's a summary of the data, right? And basically there's assignment. 60 people are assigned to the therapy, 60 people were assigned to treatment as usual, control group, and basically they're assigned regardless to these groups, regardless whether they're completers or people that dropped out of the follow-up procedure, right? And then for each repeated wave, T2, T3, T4, T5, which corresponds to 6, 12, 18, or 24 months after treatment, there's data on whether they attempted further suicide or they did not. Now, people can have more than one attempt in 6 months, and we'll return to that. But people can also attempt at T2 and then not attempt at T3 and then attempt again at T4. That happens, unfortunately. And then there are some other summary statistics for secondary outcomes, which we won't get into, but you can use them to reproduce the other results. Okay, so they restructure the data into whether you repeat it or not, which is basically those vectors of did or did not repeat that are German text, and transpose those into a factor for analysis. And then they take group, whether you are treated or not, right? Whether you are in the treatment group or in the control group. And they take time, so the follow-up in terms of in time of months. And then those are the ingredients you would need for a Kaplan-Meier survival analysis, right? Where the outcome is defined as like the time after treatment, whether you did or did not end up committing further suicide, regressed on the group you were in, namely treatment or control, or in this case treatment as usual. Right? We can run those two lines. And I added some code to basically make a visualization of that result, which should work. It does. And it gives us sort of the attempt-free survival or attempt-free percentage of participants in the treatment group in red. So up to 94% of people had not attempted further suicide after 24 months, whereas in the control or treatment as usual group, there was quite a bit more further attempts. Okay, so that's visualization of the data and or the results. And go to the results section of the paper real quick and look up the primary outcome result, right? Which we'll find here. And basically it boils down to this. The mean hazard ratio was 17, so only 17% of as many attempts in the treatment group than as in the control group, with the following confidence interval. The range is from 7% to 46%. See if we can reproduce that 17% and that 7 to 46%, right? Because that's a primary outcome. That's the one that's sort of like headline news. Let's see if we can get that. Okay. If you run the survival regression, you'll find this estimate. And it is actually uses the control group as a reference. Now in the paper they obviously use the treatment group as a reference. So one thing I had to do to get sort of the result from the paper is to flip the reference group and rerun this analysis. So this is code I had to add, but it's sort of like trivial, but it flips the reference group. And I don't even know whether it's me using a different R version or something else going on there, right? So let's see if that's I'm not judging the authors for anything. I'm just saying I had to flip the reference group to make this work for me. And then I'll get this exponent of the coefficient, which is the estimate you'd see in the paper, 17%. And we'd also get like a 95% confidence interval, which is from 60% if I round it to 45%. So it's not identical, but it's close. Now, good to know that we don't have all the data. We have an abstract or an extraction of the data. And also the authors were asked by reviewers to do sort of bootstrapping or other types of techniques to get the confidence intervals. And we aren't able to reproduce those with this data. But it's close enough where I'm like, yeah, that could be a reasonable explanation of the difference. Two robustness checks I added myself are a frailty model and an Anderson-Gill model. Why? Because this isn't really survival model data, right? Because people can attempt suicide and survive and actually attempt again or cease attempting after, right? This is like a thing that can go from hasn't attempted to back to hasn't attempted yet in certain time periods. So it's not strictly speaking a model or a data where you flip to the other state and then stay in that state, right? You can go back to not attempting suicide basically after an attempt. Both those models give me very similar results. 17% similar confidence intervals for the frailty model, Anderson-Gilbert model. Oh, some fireworks outside. Very similar effects again. Very similar confidence intervals again. So I'm not too worried that the fact that people can be in the has attempted group at one time point and then the hasn't attempted group in a later time point. I'm not too worried about this. It doesn't seem to make a difference if I model it in different ways. And with that, I want to wrap up this video. I want to emphasize that. Let me just focus on me for a second here again. I want to emphasize that this is just one study in 120 people, and it's an amazing result. But you'd have to do more studies, right? And some studies have tried very similar interventions. I'm not a clinician. I cannot judge how similar they are and whether they were applied with the same fidelity, and some have and some haven't replicated. So that's really important to know. So if you want to know more, go to my website, michel.science. And I lost you again, so here we go. Get a float on top, that will work. Michel.science, where I have a fuller write-up, which you can slowly read. It will be in the video description below. All the code I used is there as well, and some links to papers describing the robustness checks I've done, and to the other studies, Jen et al. And Hatcher et al. That use what I think are similar interventions, but which may not be similar enough to the eyes of a clinician. I'm not a clinician, I'm a scientist, so don't take my word for anything clinical. Thank you for watching, and I hope you liked the video. Catch you in the next one.